we spoke about the Intellivision new console a couple months back, and what the prospects were about it. And at the time, you know, we gave our thoughts about it being, well, what does the Intellivision really mean in this day and age? Is this going to be like an Atari VCS deal? And at the time, I remember, you know, Tommy waded into the topics and was talking to people and was like, just wait until you see what we have to reveal. Just wait and you'll get it. Wait and you'll get it. And the rumors were always that this is going to be something geared to either educational or geared towards a younger crowd. That was always the sort of rumor. So they revealed, Ian, Tommy and friends, the team at Intellivision, who had a couple booths there, revealed the Intellivision Amico.
Yes.
So the Intellivision Amico is not slated until a release 2 years from now in October 2020. So this is going to be geared towards, I guess, the family video game market. One of the biggest, I guess, surprises to me about it is that no game is going to be rated above, was it E10?
Correct.
So 10-year-old. So not even like teenage, not even like, you know.
So no game will be above E10. And all games will be 2D, is what they're saying. And before we go further, initially that seemed very strange to me. However, when you look at the games that they immediately start talking about, such as reimaginings of things like Pong, Centipede, Burger Time, and games like that, it's hard to say. It seems like they're going for a very retro feel on the games here, almost more retro than, say, like a current indie game. You
also have to be, you have to also be budget minded, especially getting to the game cost.
Sure.
Not being 3D keeps the cost down.
No. My thing is, so I'm just saying 2D, and then you talk about what they're trying to do. I feel like, for one reason, that's kid friendly. For another reason, I feel like it's just something that they're not really going to have to worry about if they're really trying to like stick to this modern but simple Atari, a television,
super flashback.
Yeah, I mean that sort of thing. If that's the model of game they're going for, it probably won't be too. You can still do adventure games. You can still do platformers. You can still do puzzlers. You can still do that stuff without it being kiddie. You can still keep it at E10.
So
basically, I mean, other than stuff, I mean, when you look back at like it, I think I understand it only because when you look at something like the Intellivision, nothing on the original Intellivision would have been teen anyways. So I think that's the point.
So the plan is just there's a couple press releases we were sent. There's also a 4-minute, really slick trailer. All of these things have slick trailers, VCS, Polymega. Retails between $149 and $179. North American, United Kingdom, and European release date will be 10/10/2020. Oh, it comes together. All games are family friendly and rated E for everyone or E10 plus. Okay, every game version on the console is exclusive. We'll get into that. Quality over quantity. Balanced gameplay and design for equal opportunity gaming. Trademark for all. Okay, I'm not sure what that is. All games were downloadable in between $3 and $8. No DLC content or add-ons or in-app purchases. Launched to include several built-in imagined Intellivision classics pre-installed in every console and over 20 games.
Imagined Intellivision classics.
And imagined because most people haven't played them. And over 20 games, including both reimagined industry classics and brand new exclusive titles via the Intellivision online store. Let's just stick with that for now.
Okay.
That part of that. So we talked about the E for everyone. It makes sense if you want to gear this towards families. I kept talking about bringing family gaming back, bringing this back, even though we'll get into why that could be erroneous since Nintendo's been doing that forever.
That was my big point.
Let's talk about that now. So I wasn't at the panel to announce it, but one of the sticking points was that these other consoles, they have games that have violence in them, games that aren't kid friendly necessarily, but that kids can maybe see by accident. But there are a lot of children titles on these other consoles. Even PS4, there's titles out there for kids.
As a person who works in retail, I will admit that it's very frustrating to sell anything on the PS4 or Xbox One to kids, especially if you're looking in used games. It is. However, the Nintendo exists.
Sure.
This is kind of the point that I made last time. This is not to be harsh, but we cannot just keep saying that there is, there's no kid-friendly systems on the market. There's no family-friendly systems on the market when the Switch exists. Nintendo's existed forever. Nintendo fills that niche.
And
Niche. I mean, that's what Nintendo does. And yes, there are some adult games on the Switch, or some adult oriented games on the Switch, but that's never been Nintendo's main focus. And it's only really been in the past 10, 15 years that Nintendo's even made an attempt to get those games on there. That's a concession to the adult gamer that Nintendo has done. Nintendo's not making concessions to kid gamers. They're making concessions to adult gamers. So that reason to me does not float. That's not a reason for...
Sure. But regardless though, if I have a family and kids, I can go on the PlayStation Store, Xbox Live Arcade. I can find them games to play. I could.
Sure. Yes, you can.
It may not be in the total abundance that we're talking about, but I can find them. I could find them packs of Intellivision games to play and Atari games that were released on these consoles. You know what I mean? I'm saying these things exist. It's just how much work are parents going to do to seek it out. And conversely, if I'm a parent, there's a way to keep my kid from buying violent games. I can watch what they're doing. They don't have my credit card information, hopefully, if they're 8 years old.
Right.
They're not going to be able to walk into a Toys R Us and buy, GTA 5. They won't be able to. They don't have it. Again, they don't have they have cash. The teller shouldn't be selling that. Well, there's no more Toys R Us's. But you see what I'm saying, though? There's some boundaries in place when it comes to this stuff already. But I see the point. Not having to worry about it at all. Like, hands off. Let's not worry about it. This is a console. They can only get these sort of games, and that's it. I do see the appeal of that to some.
Now, family friendly and cheap. Now, that's a combo that's perhaps different than, say, something like the Switch. But I don't know. The whole overlooking that there is a family friendly console.
180 isn't a cheap console. No, 180 isn't that far off. I mean,
I meant cheap game.
Oh,
games.
The games, $3 to $8. I see. The other thing I'm going to say is that kids are growing up with phones and tablets, and they already have their kid games in their hands when they grow up. So I think to say that these games are only going to be 2D, I understand you probably want to keep your costs down. You don't want to put a powerhouse chip in here that can run like any modern game, like Fortnite or what have you. But kids are growing up with stuff they're playing on their phone that are 3D.
Oh yeah.
So I don't see why you would limit yourself to that unless you don't want to get into that sort of game market.
Well, I feel like it's honestly 2D is probably kept there because they need to keep the games between $2.99 and $7.99.
So they can't afford
and
it.
You can't. Right. To me, that's got to be an affordability.
Has to be.
Yeah. It's got to be an affordability issue, or it's got to be something like that, or it's a concession. It's a middle of the road. It's an affordability thing, but also maybe the only 2D games thing is to hopefully pull in, not just family friend people who are looking for something family friendly, but just retro game enthusiasts. Maybe that's a double, it's a bid for two markets.
Do you want to talk about some of the things to talk about this? Do you want to talk about just the fact that it's branded Intellivision?
That is odd, but to me, that's not as big of a deal. I mean, it has to be branded something. It could be branded anything,
not just the Amico.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I for whatever reason, I think the name Amico kind of sounds interesting, rolls off the tongue. It could have just been branded the Amico.
So here's the gambit. I think is that obviously you get recognition. This is the same thing with you hate to bring it back up. The reason they wanted to be the Coleco Chameleon, not just the retro VGS. The same reason, you are rebranding these things is that it pulls in people to say, oh my God, Intellivision is making a new console, even though it's not the same company that existed 40 years ago. We know this company, but if the hardware that's branded with this old name doesn't really fit, it loses the purpose to me because there's nothing here that screams to me like this is the Intellivision experience until you get to those controllers. And this is where I think they went too far with the Intellivision branding, because the controllers, they want it to be reminiscent of the Intellivision controllers of old by having, instead of a D-pad, you have a circular pad.
Yes.
Which to me was one of the worst things about the Intellivision. Some people might disagree and say they loved their games that because it was like, there were 16 directions instead of 8. Okay.
Sure, but we have to think about the wide user base that they would try to be acquiring.
Sure.
So, there might be people who nostalgically love that Circle controller, but is everyone going to love it?
There's a reason that evolved past that. Right? Is that, we can all agree upon that?
That's what I'm getting at. So was it done for image, look, or recognition? If this is for kids, if this is family friendly, why not make the choice for something that's more accessible?
Because kids won't care that this is based upon the construction of a controller from 1978, 79. They won't care.
Right.
They want something that's easy to play. Will this be, and again, these are kids growing up with phones and tablets or a Switch, and they're used to having, a D-pad or even a joystick or a tactile feel. And yes, there is a touchscreen on here.
I do like the touchscreen. I think it's interesting that it's there instead of the number pad. I do kind of like that. I'm going to be honest.
Well, that would be like a no-brainer in this day and age to do that.
Yeah, sure. I do I'm just saying I think it's cute.
But I think we banking on probably a console name and then going back to the well on the controller design is too far, especially when you have like the side control buttons. Now, yes, you're going to be playing your reimagined Intellivision games on this, but you can play them in other ways besides the original controller form. You can.
Right. It looks to me a bit too limiting if you did eventually decide you wanted to branch out and do something slightly different.
You're limited to that.
Yeah, that's not a... Jesus, Pat. That's not... That's... There's a limit to my patience.
Go on, Ian.
Don't you get snappy. I just don't see... That control scheme worked for those older type games. It's not going to work real well, I don't think, for a lot of modern day platformers. And a lot of people don't. And sure, you can put buttons and on the touchscreen.
The side buttons are terrible for those sort of games.
And you can put touchscreen buttons on the top, but I don't like using touchscreen buttons.
But they have the side action buttons, the same way ColecoVision did, and those get really difficult to use for certain types of games. They do. But you got to
over time. Yes.
You got to grab it underneath, like what? So okay. So you have a bunch of, there's like HDMI out, of course. You have things like that. Gyroscope, accelerometer, force feedback, speaker, microphone, free downloadable app enables mobile phones as additional controllers, up to 8 players. That's cool.
That is.
If you can do a party style game or what have you, you can do that.
I like the wireless charging. That's essentially like the wireless charging that all cell phones use now.
Sure.
Just drop it and go.
That makes sense. Online store, of course. There's a leaderboard system online for high scores, trophy awards, and achievements. And then you get to the reimagined games. So Intellivision Classics reimagined and remade exclusively for the Amico. So that means we gotta get the work here on let's see, Astro Smash and Shark. Didn't we talk about that on the podcast how they tried to do that with a Kickstarter a couple years ago?
They did. We did actually talk about that.
But then we figured out they were already remastered. They were available in some form.
That was so long ago, but yes, we did talk about that.
They were available somewhere. But I just think it's funny. Baseball, Night Stalker, skiing, Math Fun, Snafu, Utopia, Frog Bog, and more. And B-17 Bomber, which people only know because of the voiceover. Atari Classics reimagined and remade. So you have Pong, Asteroids, Centipede, Tempest, Adventure, Missile Command, more. And then iMagic Classics reimagined and remade. Those were the silver boxed Intellivision games, and also some of those appeared on Atari. Microsurgeon, Atlantis, Demon Attack, Dracula, Beauty and the Beast, Ice Trek, Swords of Serpents, Dragonfire, Truck and more. And then other games reimagined and remade exclusively. You have Miner 2004 Niner, Super Burger Time, Bad Dudes, Caveman Ninja, R-Type. So you have IREM games like 10 Yard Fight, Load Runner, some Broderbund games. You have Spelunker, Kung Fu Master, and more. Toe Jam and Earl's on there too. And Archon, which is our favorite NES strategy board game / action game.
I wish I could play it better.
It's a great game.
I actually do like that game quite a bit.
So in the press release and also in the video, they touted that Intellivision was a legacy of firsts. About first technically 16-bit system. It sold across 3 decades, even though no one was buying it by even the mid 80s really. But it did. I guess they sold it up till 90. The directional thumb pad. That became the D-pad, pause feature, sports games that were licensed for the first time, the first games you can buy online because they had the little modem thingy-majobber, so things like that. So I don't know, again, with the Intellivision branding, what audience they're reaching at here. The only people out there that really are familiar with Intellivision are hardcore game collectors or older folks at this point, because when this console came out in 79, you probably would have been at least 10 or 12 to own this. This was the Intellivision was pushed as like the technically superior, like Neo Geo of its time. Like this was the console that put the Atari VCS to shame. It was in all their marketing with author George Plimpton,
Yes.
to say, like, look at the Atari games, they're simple and they look like trash, and here's our baseball game with actually has 9 players on the field. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. The games are more complicated because they had more buttons, so you can do more. You can do stuff like what was it, the Quest for the Rings, the Lord of the Rings sort of knockoff game they had. You can do stuff like that you could never dream of doing on the Atari.
Utopia.
There was a lot of games like that were okay. They're a little more advanced, but Atari was always known as the games that were, had the arcade experience. They were simple. They were easy to get into and fun. So when you're branding it Intellivision, I would think that would not be the simple children's game just on its face in terms of the branding, because that's not exactly how it was pushed and touted and thought about. Not thought about to this day as a console that was friendly towards children. It wasn't. The Intellivision. It wasn't. They didn't have all the kid-friendly arcade games that you had in the Atari. So, to me, again, there's a disconnect there in the branding, but that's not the biggest deal to me with that.
Yeah, I'm less hung up on the branding just because the kids aren't going to know one way or another, so it's not going to matter. My bigger question is really when it comes to the idea of entirely exclusive games and how that would work and how that's going to last. With games at $2.99 to $7.99 a piece, if it doesn't sell. I mean, I hope for everyone it works out, but if it doesn't, I mean, those people. I mean, how long can you develop exclusively for one system if it turns out that this isn't going to work?
Well, developers can't because they got to make money elsewhere. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you can't.
Yes.
So if the Intellivision launches and they get an install base of only 1,000 people, you can't develop for it exclusively all your time. So it's a gambit. I guess see, I don't know much about what's on if they have an in-house team that's doing this and only doing it, makes sense. Like a first-party team that's going to be okay. We have obviously they have the rights to these Intellivision games.
Obviously, but I'm looking at things like R-Type, which has always had a billion remakes. So I mean, what's going to separate that remake?
And it's already been a lot of these games already been reimagined.
Right. So what's going to separate the remake on the Intellivision of R-Type, from other remakes of R-Type or re-releases of R-Type? What's going to set Toe Jam and Earl? We already know is doing, Limited Run's been talking about Toe Jam and Earl, and
yes.
So I mean, what's going to set what is going to make it so exclusive as to make it special enough to have people, to make that matter? Sure.
Just a couple of things from the press release that I want to comment on from the second press release. We are creating a console that parents want to buy and not that they were asked to buy, stated Intellivision president and 30-year industry veteran Tommy Tallarico during his keynote address over the weekend at PRGE. I'm not sure you can say that parents want to buy something before it's on the market. I think you're looking at parenting a different way for the new generation, because parents now are even younger than we are. Parents are 30 years old, 25. These are people that, most of them don't know what the Intellivision is, but they're growing up, again, giving their kids iPhones and tablets. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. I'm just saying that's what's happening.
Nintendo consoles.
And Nintendo consoles. Kids are playing. People don't give kids enough credit for being able to grasp the complexity of some stuff, too.
I tell that to people all the time in the store. They're like, well, is this game going to be too hard for my kids? And it's like, what age were you when you remember playing your first game? 4? 5,
yes.
6? I said kids want to play video games. They will figure out video games.
So Tommy said most every game being made for the home consoles these days is created with only the hardcore gamer in mind. We see a world where everyone is interested in playing at home with friends, but this isn't currently possible because the barrier to entry is nearly impossible for a non-gamer due to the complexity of the controllers, intricacy of gameplay, and expense of the hardware and software, and steep learning curve with an unbalanced fun factor for the beginner. I don't think that's true. I just don't. I think you can give a 5-year-old Super Mario Odyssey and they'll figure it out in 5-10 minutes.
Mario Kart.
Or Mario Kart. They're smart.
It goes back to Nintendo. I
Yeah,
don't want to sound...
I'm not totally poo-pooing this, but I mean, I was a kid who learned how to use BASIC on an XT when I was 5 and 6 to load games. You know what I mean? Like, kids figured this stuff out. You know,
I just feel like there was a marketing avenue that maybe could... I think the console... Personally, I'm going to be completely honest here. I think the console kind of looks interesting.
Okay.
It does. I'm not going to lie. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's something neat about the touchscreen controller or what it is, or I don't know. There is something that there is something about it that is somewhat appealing to me. However, it's this marketing that really confounds me because I don't know. I'm not sure how we could get into an entire marketing campaign like this without anyone thinking, wait, no, this is done. This has been done.
Yes.
This is done, because almost every answer here is answered by another company that's already out there doing this for $100 more.
This is the only thing from the press release that really bothered me, this part. Game industry analyst and Wedbush Securities managing director of equity research, Michael Pachter, commented,
Oh, no.
I think it's about time somebody focused on families and kid-friendly games. And this is the same guy that hated on Nintendo for years and said that well, he was right to saying the Wii U was bad, but he said the Switch was going to just be dead in the water. And he said that Nintendo should go after the hardcore audience, you know, in order to be successful. This is a guy that said that. And now he's saying that no one's been focused on families when Nintendo was forever and ever and ever. So that rubs him the wrong way. Michael Pachter, by the way, is wrong most of the time on stuff.
Yeah.
He's just a guy that was on game trailers, 8-9 years ago.
And I'm just sitting here now realizing that people are going to say we're being Nintendo fanboys.
We're not.
But I'm really not in this instance. It's just...
But Nintendo's a console everyone's been knocked for being too kiddie. Forever.
Yes.
And ever. And ever.
And now...
And now they're not anymore, apparently.
Now they're not kiddie enough.
Yeah. So... All right, anything else to add to this? Like I said, I don't know if this is going to be a success or not. There's a team behind this of people from the industry. There's a laundry list of people. So they have.
There are some good names behind it.
There's a laundry list lined up, which is great. That's good to hear. That's always good when you have a list of people that you can say, okay, these guys have published games in the past. These guys have worked on stuff that's actually shipped. So that's good.
I feel like there's a solid team behind it. I feel like there are some interesting ideas to it. I just wish there was no connection of any nostalgic base that has almost no reason for it to exist in this day and age. They start the trailer with the Intellivision Running Man, which no one knows what that is when they see that. So it's you're right. It's a weird mishmash. If it's trying, like I said earlier, it's trying to appeal to two very different target demographics:
families and people that are nostalgic for the Intellivision, which are two entirely different groups of people at this day and age.
There you go.
It just is.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens in 2 years. I'm sure we'll get a lot more announcements. We're going to get a lot more changes. My advice is this. Drop the Intellivision style controller. Drop it immediately. There's no reason for that to be there except or offered separately just for the Intellivision games for that small part of the audience that wants to play
that.
Do
it separately. Put a controller on there with it. I mean, design a controller with a touchpad as well and put the same buttons, but...
You don't want a 4-year-old trying to wrangle an Intellivision style controller with grip buttons and that. You want the kid to play something they're already familiar with or know about and not have to relearn a controller scheme that thankfully died out by 1980. There's a reason why no one continued that style of controller afterwards.
All right,
that's it.
Moving on.